Okay.
Give me a warning before, so I can clear my throat before. It's still early yet.
Huh?
Got 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes? Okay. We ended up that night.
Who edits it?
Huh?
You edit it?
I just say that I don't really know the editing. Some people at different schools, some people are like, oh, we like all the chit chat in the beginning. Just to feel like you're there in the room.
No. Depends what the chit chat's about. Gotta be careful.
No, I think Perry cuts it out.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
When it's red, it means it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Red is on.
Yeah.
Green is off.
I think so.
Think so.
Yeah, I pushed the red. There's a clock going.
Oh, okay.
And this sounds pretty good. So you stick it right far. Get other people's voice. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think everybody's in the woman's voice.
So, I guess I'll begin even without everybody.
Anybody who wants to be here?
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is part 3 of our investigation of the Satipatthana Sutta. And last time we got up to the section on feeling. Hopefully you've been practicing it, so you get some feeling about it. Feelings are a very important aspect of the Buddha's teachings because they are very fundamental to basically our motivation for doing things. We create kamma. In the dependent origination formula, feeling causes craving. So if you get a good understanding of feelings, then you're in a good position to understand the nature of craving. And craving is the cause of ultimately all our suffering. So understand craving, letting go of craving is the way to liberation. So we're well on the way, right? So the Buddha keeps it quite simple, I would say, in the beginning anyway, because feelings, just 3 feelings, basic ones. Pleasant, which is sukha, unpleasant, dukkha, and neutral, which is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. I mean, when you begin to investigate feelings, perhaps one of the earliest things you realize is the great range of feelings. Under that one word, sukha, pleasant feeling, for example. Let's do pleasant feelings first. Start off on a good note. Pleasant note. Just that one word, sukha, if you look at it, investigate pleasant feeling, you may notice a huge variety of pleasant feelings. You know, you can talk about the degree of feeling, pleasant, comfortable, pleasant feeling, slightly pleasant, moderately pleasant, greatly pleasant, even up to ecstasy. Then, of course, what the Buddha also mentioned in that teaching about feelings was that where the different quality of the feeling, whether it's a worldly feeling or spiritual feeling. So it's very significant in the Buddhist teachings that the Buddha just didn't try to ignore feelings, suppress feelings. Some people think maybe Buddhism, we sit there with our eyes closed and we just don't feel anymore, just numb, what do they call it, kind of, you just went into a trance or something, see? But even the Arahant has feelings. What's different with the Arahant is that they understand the nature of feelings. So because the feelings are so fundamental to what motivates us in life, basically all sentient beings, if you put it very, very bluntly, all sentient beings, including humans, spend their whole life seeking pleasant feeling, avoiding unpleasant feeling. That's it. That's life. In one sentence, one phrase. Wherever you look, there's pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling, or neutral if you like. So the Buddha realized how fundamental this was to life, so he had a different take on it. The spiritual pleasant feeling was not to be avoided. It was even a key to spiritual practice. You may have noticed, if you do have pleasant feeling, we say, if you're enjoying yourself, which in this context is you're experiencing pleasant feeling, you notice how time goes very quickly, how focused you are with pleasant feeling. And the opposite, unpleasant feeling, how time can go so slow. You can't wait for it to go faster, but but when you have pleasant feeling, you notice you can be quite focused. The reason time goes so quickly is you're focused on the present moment. So you don't see the passing of time, really. You're just absorbed. So the Buddha understood this. So in one of the suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya about the chapter on dependent origination, and we'll get around to it eventually, but there's one of the suttas that's sometimes been called transcendental dependent origination, because it doesn't just show how suffering arises, but it also, there's a conditioned, a whole series of conditioned factors that lead to liberation. It's a bit unusual then from this, usual formula of dependent origination. But it's from the usual formula of ignorance causing sankharas, causing consciousness, causing name and form, etc., to the whole mass of suffering. Gets down to suffering, dukkha, and then dukkha gives rise to faith. Faith gives rise to gladness. We're getting better, aren't we? We're out of the dukkha. For a moment, we're rising up. Gladness gives rise to rapture or joy, piti. And this joy gives rise to tranquility. Tranquility is a cause of sukha. And then sukha is a cause of concentration. And then it goes on to knowledge and vision and liberation. That's a bit later. Don't want to get too far ahead of us. But see, here the Buddha understood that happiness is a cause of concentration. Well, you can say sukha. This is, again, this word sukha is very loaded because, and it's a bit unusual. When we try to translate it into English, it's difficult because the translators try and use one word of English for one word of Pali. But you can see in this form here that it goes from, pleasant feeling, sukha, vedana, pleasant feeling. It goes up to happiness, and then, happiness doesn't necessarily not just happiness causes concentration, but it needs to be something much deeper, huh? A deeper kind of well-being. I would say well-being. Well-being causes concentration. It's when I feel happy, for example. Maybe I'm being too personal here, but when I feel happy, I'm a little bit excited. Which is a kind of concentration, but it's not based on tranquility, though. Tranquility causes well-being, causes concentration, you see. So it's a different kind, I would say, a different degree of sukha, of well-being. Just like in the phrase, I think in Dhammapada, it says, Nibbanang paramang sukhang. For those who speak Pali, Nibbana is the ultimate sukha. So it's not just, Nibbana is the ultimate happy hour or something, Yes. So it's usually used, happiness, right? Happy hour. You have a few drinks and then you're happy, for a little while anyway. But that's not Nibbana. Sorry, folks, it's not Nibbana. Maybe it's the closest that some people get, maybe. So when you investigate sukha, for example, pleasant feeling, you recognize there's a great range of degrees of it, you see. And then you can begin to appreciate also the effect. Like I say, when there is real well-being, you notice there is concentration. Your mind's really peaceful and spacious. And your body's relaxed too, right? If you'd follow that exercise, the very first exercise we did with the breathing, and the last of the 4 exercises were to breathing in and breathing out, tranquilizing the body, training your mind to tranquilize the body, right? So tranquility is a cause of happiness, sukha. So they're all step by step, you think. And then if we now turn to dukkha, it's also likewise a great range of experiences of dukkha, right? And maybe this is a little bit harder to appreciate because, generally speaking, we have a natural, as the Buddha said, we have a natural resistance to dukkha. There's an underlying disposition of aversion. The word is actually more like irritation or repugnance to pleasant feeling. Close to aversion. It's natural, it's an underlying disposition, so people are resistant to it. That's why, I think in the Western society that when you start talking about suffering, everybody leaves the room, But there's a kind of a paradox, I think I would call it a paradox. When I decided to go to Thailand, for example, I'd studied a little bit about Buddhism. I traveled quite a few places, and I went back to university, and I thought I would study about the religions of all these countries I saw, you see. And so I studied a bit about Buddhism to get the kind of facts of the religion. What you often see in the culture isn't always the facts of what the religion is about. More like superstition many times. But then in studying about Buddhism, there was quite a bit of mention of suffering, right? 4 Noble Truths. And unfortunately, it wasn't very well translated because many people in the West say the Buddha is saying that life is suffering. Not what the Buddha is saying. He's just saying there is suffering in life. But most important is there's a way out of it. People don't continue with that explanation of the 4 Noble Truths. They say, suffering, that's enough, thank you, bye-bye. But there's suffering, a cause, a cessation, and a path of practice to get out of it. See? That's the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha wasn't saying that all life is suffering, because again, there's different varieties of dukkha. Okay, there's dukkha vedana, which is pain, but life is not always painful. There's sukha vedana also. So the dukkha is used in different contexts as a feeling and as a noble truth. The noble truth, I would say, is more like imperfection. It's not, and the physical pain is just a symptom of life's imperfection. We'd like life to be perfectly pleasant, right? But every once in a while there's a mosquito in the room. If that's, usually more than that, but there's an elephant in the room. Not just a mosquito, but so I think you do the morning chanting every morning. Yeah. So in the morning chanting, if you didn't know, there's a definition of suffering, dukkha, right? So this is besides dukkha vedana as a feeling, The Buddha also defines dukkha quite a number of different ways. Jatipi dukkha. Remember the chanting?
Yes.
You do it in English?
Yeah.
Oh, you do it? Yeah, in English too. Okay. Oh, so you know already. I'll remind you. Huh? Birth is dukkha. Aging, death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the disliked.
Stupid, definitely.
Separation from the light. Not attaining one's wishes. And in brief, this is a bit funny, the 5 focuses of identity. The 5 groups of grasping, I would say. The Panch Upadana Kanda, we'll get to later, are dukkha. So that's more than just, dukkha Vedana, isn't it? I mean, how do I, maybe some of you mothers know what the birth is suffering, right? But I don't know. I was there, but I don't remember. I can, aging is suffering, yes, I know that. Death, I don't know yet. So it's pointing out more existential suffering, if you like, existential. That about the unsatisfactoriness or the imperfection of human life then is dukkha. So it's more than just pain, but pain, physical pain, can be an opening to it, to show the limitations of the body, and that this body is imperfect, and the mind too, mental suffering too is imperfect. The mental life is imperfect. So by studying about these different feelings, we can get a much more deeper insight into the nature of our reactions too. As it mentions in what's called the refrain in the scripture, the instructions, observing the arising factor, the cessation factors. And we can also sometimes, when you're trying to observe feelings, you notice the reactions to it. Huh? You notice what kind of result comes out of that feeling, like the desire for pleasant feeling, resistance to unpleasant feeling, and basically the kind of dullness or delusion of neutral feeling. So then we move on to the next theme. It's called the contemplation of mind, Chitta Anupassana. And in the Buddha's teaching, Chitta, you could say, maybe it's more correct to say, it's more like the contents of the mind. It isn't the mind per se, it's the contents of it. Like it's not like having a physiological investigation of the brain, for example, but what goes on in the mind. And the purpose, the value of observing the nature of the mind, what's going on in the mind, allows us to become a bit more, putting ourselves in the position of the observer of mental activity. Because a lot of people, of course, identify with what's in their mind, right? Yeah? You hear the little voice, I am thinking, rather than thought is me. Or, who was it? Descartes, huh? I think, therefore I am. Huh? Yeah. But in the Buddhist approach, you say, there is thinking, therefore I think I am. There's thinking going on, and you wonder who it is. Is it not that? Not you. It must be me, I guess. By default. When actually thinking, you think I'm thinking, but it's thinking is thinking you. But I mean, it's not a matter of just believing it, but a matter of investigating. When you can observe the nature of mental activity, you begin to notice how little control I have over it. And you can say basically you learn to observe the mind rather than be the mind. Or you can say, well, you're being the observer of the mind, which is a bit more of an advanced or a more developed state, spiritual state, be the observer. because sati is also in the mind. It's also a condition of mind, a state of mind, if you like. But the Buddha realized it is a more developed one when you develop it, because it is, at its ultimate level, is free of self-involvement. It's a choiceless awareness, non-judgmental awareness. Where normally, most of us have a little, notice a thought arising and then, oh, I like that thought, I want that thought. Shows I'm intelligent, shows I'm stupid, I'm worried, I'm confused, I'm. But if you can just observe it, then that sense of an I coming into it doesn't arise. Oh, there's a thought arising. Where'd that come from? Was it what I had for lunch today? Is it the weather? Rather than me, most people would just go right to themselves. I'm thinking this thought, I'm evil. I'm thinking that thought, I'm enlightened. Or anything else, you have a whole range of possibilities there. And when you've read that, right, about the mind, that was your homework. Yeah, the different. Those are only. I would say there's more than 16 states of mind. Might noticed a few more, like a few thousand more. So this is just a kind of a selection. It was pointing out a certain selection, giving us a little opening to what to look for. For example, and he starts off with the so-called unwholesome states of mind, trying to observe greed, aversion, delusion, and likewise, and their opposite. When the mind doesn't have greed, aversion, delusion, it doesn't mean that you're an arahant. That happens. It's more like when that particular state of mind, that particular activity of mind is not present. You can notice when there is thoughts of greed, of desire, of longing, of wanting something, and when there's an absence of it. Well, everything's okay. Something you want? I get asked quite often, something I can get you? I got to stop and think. What do I want? And then I recognize some things that I want are going to be more of a headache than not having them. And it may sound very simple, just try to observe the mind with lust or greed, the mind with aversion, with anger. But you notice it was the third exercise here, because it's a lot harder than you think. Harder than thinking, harder than you imagine to look at your greed. I think we're basically programmed not to look at our defilements. We're programmed to look at our wonderful qualities, our strengths, our weaknesses. But when the mind is calm enough, you notice that the mind is calm enough, non-judgmental enough, that it is possible every once in a while to notice, oh, there is some longing, there is some aversion there. It gives you at least an opening to that possibility, to recognize that there is that possibility in your mind. And then, of course, once you can get a bit of an opening to it, what I call a psychological breakthrough, when you notice these unpleasant states of mind or these negative states of mind, then it's not so bad. Like I was mentioning about dukkha vedana. I didn't finish that story, didn't I? I studied about Buddhism, right? Before going to Thailand. You might need to edit that back in there. Shifted around. So then I was going to Thailand, a Buddhist country, and then they called Thailand the land of smiles. And I don't think it wasn't just a tourist presentation. It was, when I got there, it was real. People were really smiling. And I thought, they're supposed to be Buddhists who are knowing all about suffering, supposed to be suffering Buddhists, but they're smiling. Are they for real? Is this just a big tourist campaign? Keep smiling for the tourists, but no, it wasn't a campaign at all. And then I had I met this man, one of the elderly men who came to the monastery regularly. He would come into the monastery, and we'd come back from alms round to help with sorting out the food and things. And one day he was standing there waiting for me to come and empty my bowl into the big pot, take to the kitchen. And I just sort of said to him, "Oh, so how are you feeling today?" And he said, "I'm suffering." And then he burst out laughing. And I thought, has he been drinking already? Why can he say suffering and then just laugh at it, And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" I was really serious. I thought it was serious. He said, "Oh, I have, it's hard to translate, Salok Sangvait. Salok Sangvait. It means he has sort of, I spoke Thai, didn't I? How do you translate it? It's sort of, Sangvega is Sangvega, means a sense of urgency. So, and Salok is like sorrow, isn't it? Yeah, something like that. It's hard to translate in English, but he recognized that he didn't live a very skillful life, so he had a lot of regret over his life, I would say, regret. But then he realized, the Buddhist teaching has a way out, So then he made him quite happy that he could, oh, right, I'm not just stuck in my bad karma for the rest of my life, but there is a way to practice to work through it, get out of it, be liberated, you see. So the kind of paradox is that if you try to ignore suffering, you can't. You get more suffering. Because suffering is a characteristic of human life, unsatisfactoriness. You can't get away from it. Even when, maybe you have to wait till you die even before you wake up to it, but you can't get away from it. But when you can open to it, you realize that there's a way out of it. It's like when you're trying to avoid it, it's like you're pushing it away, so you got two kinds of suffering. The original kind and the one to push it away. But when you can acknowledge it, you can relax. So I noticed, for example, that in the Western country, this is being a bit, generalizing quite a bit actually, but when you mention about suffering in the West, people are, "Oh, I don't want to hear about it. Just talk about happiness and light and love." But they aren't very joyful. They're all uptight, and they're all a bit nervous, and they're afraid of the elephant in the room, suffering. But it's there, but they don't want to see it. So everybody's ignoring it and very, very uptight about it. But in Thailand, for example, not everybody, again, but they recognize, oh yeah, there's suffering, it's part of life. Ha ha ha, it's a big deal. What's the problem? So they can be very relaxed with it. When I visited my mother, one of the first times I went back to Canada after being a monk, and then my brother was getting married, but I had to go back to Thailand before his wedding for the Rasa season. She said, "Oh, you can't be here for the wedding." She said, "Oh, but you can do marriages, right?" I said, "No, we don't do marriages." She said, "What do you do?" I said, "Funerals." We just do funerals. She said, "Oh, how morbid," she said. I said, "Actually, it's not. A funeral in Thailand is quite, I wouldn't say a joyful experience, but it's quite a...
Unite.
Yeah, I mean, people go there to wish their loved one goodbye, and it's not depressing. But with the funerals in the West, they're black and they're gloomy, and everybody's feeling, depressed about it. You wish the person well on their journey. Good luck. I'm stuck here and I have to die yet. I have to go through the suffering of dying, and you've already done it. So you're ahead of me. You're over the worst. Of course, they can't hear you, but. So if you look at, for example, physical pain in the body, if you can just look at it and relax into it, notice that the resistance to it is probably more suffering than the pain itself. Right? Notice that. resistance is more painful, more suffering than the pain itself. Once you can relax into it, it's just sensation, unpleasant sensation, just that. So the same with these states of mind, when you think about, aversion, for example, like so many people have difficulty dealing with their aversion. Most of the difficulty is they don't want to deal with it. They're afraid to deal with it. The point is when you can just acknowledge, there is aversion. Yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah. Every sentient being has aversion. Yeah? It's not your problem. It's a problem of being born, that's all. You have unpleasant feeling, you have a latent disposition to aversion, to unpleasant feeling. It's hardwired into us. But then your aversion to it, your resistance to it, is more of a problem. So if you can just recognize, acknowledging aversion, many times, if it doesn't exactly disappear, because you recognize just, why am I doing this? Why am I holding on to it? At least it's held within a place of calm and wisdom and concentration. So it's not so prickly and not so extreme anymore. So aversion, you're just observing aversion. Yeah, not so pleasant, but that's the way it is. But you have to work at it because we aren't programmed to do that naturally. That's why the Buddha gave one of the meditations about metta bhavana, friendliness, rather than allow yourself to go into the usual latent, the underlying disposition of aversion or repugnance or irritation about unpleasant feeling. Try to be more friendly to it, receptive to it, open to it, and see what happens. So when we recognize, we try to follow those instructions of the Buddha, just to acknowledge there is greed, there is lust. It feels like this. There is that state of mind, there is that expression in the body, just like that. And then you notice it's opposite. Today there isn't any. Maybe it's not gone forever. Usually it's just temporarily. You have a temporary reprieve. Because the causes are still there, but sometimes it arises, sometimes it doesn't, through cause and effect. And you're observing what causes lust, greed, aversion, irritation, delusion, confusion to arise. And when it passes away, sometimes it just passes away by itself, because there isn't the stimulation there, the condition there. Sometimes your mind changes. And as you may notice in the instructions for this one and the feelings, the Buddha is pointing out, you can say the wholesome and the unwholesome, especially with the mind, the unwholesome states, greed, aversion, delusion, and then the wholesome are it's non-greed, non-delusion, non-aversion, non-delusion. Maybe even they're positive ones. From greed, it's generosity. Aversion, it's metta. Delusion, it's clarity. So you begin to notice the so-called wholesome and unwholesome states of mind, which Venerable Analios points out, this increases our ethical sensitivity. Got that? Two big words here. But the same with the feelings. You notice the worldly feelings, the unworldly spiritual feelings. So you recognize, which one is, you can say, ethically, morally more useful, wholesome, beneficial? Is greed more beneficial than generosity? Is it? Find out for yourself. Well, don't take it too far. Don't rob a bank or something. Just notice the states of mind as you're in the meditation retreat and everything's calmed down. Don't let it get too far out of hand. And then there is, in this 16 states of mind, you notice there's 3 of them, 3 sets, 6. There's actually 8 sets of 2, right? There is greed and non-greed, aversion, non-aversion, aversion, non-aversion, delusion, non-aversion, delusion.
6.
Yeah, and then it goes on to, there's a neutral one, you can say distracted and contracted states of mind, and then it goes on to the very positive states of mind. The exalted mind, the unsurpassed mind, the liberated mind, and concentrated mind and liberated mind. Okay, remember them all? Anyway, it's it's pointing out, from the unwholesome to the very advanced wholesome states of mind. And in the middle there's a one set, contracted and distracted, which is, technically they say both of them are unwholesome. Contracted mind is more like the mind, the commentary says it's the mind that's contracted through sloth and torpor, through lethargy and sleepiness. Distracted mind has restlessness. But become aware of those tendencies so that ideally one develops a more balanced state of mind, not contracted, not distracted. And then one moves into the positive ones, the great mind. And also in the morning chanting, or some of the chanting, it mentions, you probably have done the chanting on metta. Yeah. So that in metta you develop a immeasurable, boundless state of mind for metta. Well, actually the 4 Brahmaviharas. So have you experienced an immeasurable state of mind recently? Do you know what that is? It is possible. It can be developed, you see. So, but maybe you need to, the Buddha points them out. These states of mind are possible. And then now try to observe it. Maybe in the beginning it's just a little bit greater state of mind than your previous one, more exalted state of mind than your previous one. Doesn't need to be total jhanic absorption, but more exalted than before. Very spacious, open, uplifted, energized, radiant. It's early days yet.
3 weeks, only 2 weeks.
Yes, it's only 3 weeks so far. But we're working on it, right? Maybe I should have drawn this one out to a few more weeks. But to get to these more exalted states of mind, we have to work through the hindrances, which is in the next week. And sometimes, it's not a matter of just imagining an exalted state of mind, but sometimes when you're doing the basic meditation exercises, you do notice, just like, out of the blue, sometimes you don't even know how or why, but sometimes your mind is calm. Just what happened? And the development of the mind doesn't necessarily go in a steady progress. Sometimes there's disturbances come along, and But if you're observing these states of mind over a more sustained period of time, you may notice there is a progression. We can't say how long. Some people they imagine, oh yes, I got. When I went to Thailand, I imagined I would just stay for 1 month, get enlightened, and go home. 46 years later, I think I had the wrong definition of enlightened. Still working on it, but it is a lot better. Anyway. But it didn't happen in a month, so I had to renew my visa for another month, and for 9 years eventually in Thailand. So as you get initially maybe you just have an idea or a concept of what an exalted state of mind is. But once you develop it, you begin to appreciate, have a direct experience, it's just a little bit more exalted than previously. And then there's surpassable. They talk about in those states, those particular forms the Buddha mentions, that the commentary refers to the jhanas, absorptions, when the mind begins to realize exalted states of concentration. And then that feeds back into well-being, sukha, and then that sukha feeds back into concentration again and mindfulness, and so a lot of these factors, they kind of have feedback loops. Once you recognize some of the key ones, exalted, surpassable, and concentrated, you might recognize liberated sometimes. And I mean, sometimes the thinking mind tends to be kind of, black or white. I think liberated is an arahant. But I would say, look at it momentarily. Your mind can be momentarily liberated. I don't have any greed, aversion, delusion. I don't know how many times, since I studied Buddhism before going to Thailand to meditate, then my mind was still in this intellectual mode. So as I'm sitting there meditating, once in a while I would say, oh, look at, no greed, aversion, I'm an arahant. And then, of course, I like it. Oh, okay, I got some greed, okay. And then, I lost it. I have some aversion, okay. I guess I'm not enlightened today. I'll try tomorrow. So it was between the theory and the practice is quite a range of possibilities there. See, so it's not just a matter of thinking yourself, although you can. I mean, some people, I think they read a lot about what they're supposed to be doing, and I think this is a little bit of a, I don't want to say a limitation, but a danger, I guess, a danger for Westerners anyway, practicing, is that I think a lot of the Asian teachers don't recognize how much we can conceptualize, how good we are at conceptualizing. So we can read the instructions and think ourselves into these states and not actually experience them. So like there is a book around, I won't mention the name of it, that shows about explains the different stages of enlightenment. And and it was a one monastery, and the teacher there specifically said, do not read, ahead of where you are in your practice. Well, that's just like Pandora's box. Don't open that box. So, so you're on level 3, don't look at level 4. So you have to be careful how much you're dependent upon the conceptualizing of these experiences. So important that it comes from a calm mind. Say, a non-judgmental, non-discursive, direct experience. And this is what the really purpose of mindfulness is, developing awareness, clear awareness, bare awareness, just a noticing. That's what the instructions say, right? Just enough, for clear knowing and mindfulness. That means don't get too conceptual about it. Don't get too, don't need to think about it or plan it, organize it too much. Just stay with the direct experience, and you see for yourself. In the forest tradition, they talk about Satipatthana, that the wisdom that comes from mindfulness, clear seeing, is the real basis of wisdom, not all the intellectual knowledge you have about it. I think it's a very helpful reflection for a lot of people in the West, because we are exposed to so many books. Here I am looking at the bookshelf there. Rather than facing around looking at the Buddha, I'm facing at the bookshelf. But you're looking at the Buddha, right? The Buddha is that which knows. The books aren't that which knows. So follow the Buddha rather than the book. So So I got some time for questions. And as I mentioned, there's more than 16 states of mind. These are just kind of the, pointing out specific ones that are very useful to be aware of, from the so-called unwholesome to the wholesome. We'll get into more the next theme about the Dhammas. You can say is more like specific states of mind, if you like. The hindrances, the factors of awakening. And so looking at these general ones gives us an idea, a general plan of wholesome, unwholesome, and what to look out for, special attention to. So, questions?
Ajahn, you mentioned about jati, birth, and that you can't remember how it was dukkha, but would it be that every time, because we are rebirthing at every second, that is dukkha, because as soon as you make a sense of self and you try to make something mine, isn't that a birth?
Yep.
And that's dukkha.
Mm-hmm.
So I was contemplating on that when I was reading the...
You're reading?
No, the sutta today, that came to me.
Yeah. Different understanding. You give a different understanding of birth then, and aging. And
it just came to me when you said that now, that it really helps me get scared of my opinions and views, and I can easily let go of it when I think of it like that.
You can notice the birth of I.
Like every
I
time
think, I like, I want, I.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want this, so, and then when I'm not getting what I want, I'm getting, so that makes me realize that I'm in self, and I kind of take a step back and let go. So would that be birth?
Yes, yeah.
Can that be considered birth?
Yep. I mean, technically they just try and explain it in its simplest form, what people are most familiar with. But for a meditator, you have a different understanding of these terms.
Okay.
Yeah. Different understanding of mind, for example, and birth and aging and death, and like not getting what you want. That's kind of a death too.
Exactly.
My death of my desires. Oh no! Yeah. If you identify with your desires and that you can't get it, it's like dying. Yeah.
I was one aware of a mind of delusion. Isn't it delusion?
There, you got it. You got it right there. You're not observing the mind of delusion. That's delusion. I mean, for an easy route, for me anyway, is I look at much more obvious symptoms of delusion. Confusion, doubt, worry, fear, those kind of things are also forms of delusion. But for me, they're a little bit more easier to observe. Confusion, for example. That's a manifestation of delusion. I don't know. Delusion is I don't know, so it manifests as confusion, doubt, worry. I don't know, so I'm trying to figure it out, so I'm worrying about it. So it depends what your preference is. what your personality bias is, or something, or your...
Is that right? Like it's a blankness, noticing.
Blankness too, yeah. Lack of clarity.
With a mind, a contracted mind, does it make sense to say that the opposite of that is wholesome? So, an expanded mind or spacious mind,
Mm-hmm.
and there's also with a distracted mind. I mean, there can be kind of like a tendency to conceptualize the opposite of a distracted mind as a contracted mind sometimes. So like, because a distracted mind is dispersed everywhere, and the opposite of that must be non-dispersal, which must mean a small dot, or something like.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
But then you're back to contracted again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those-
But if you change that definition around to distracted to focused, then it inclines more to concentration, which is a more wholesome state of mind. The same with contracted. You know, the opposite of contracted is spacious, but the tendency is that it can be, you know, your spaciousness can be a bit spacey, a bit non-defined. You know, like some people have a tendency to confuse concentration with being spaced out. Concentration literally is more focused, ekagata, one-pointedness, not spaced out. You know, the space out part of concentration arises because of either lack of energy or because of sukha. When people experience in concentration, experience degrees of pleasant feeling, then they just melt into it. And they lose their focus, you know, but when their eyes start to glass over, it looks like they're in concentration, but we call them space cadets. They're spaced out, blissed out. And that kind of well-being has a place, but unless it's you say supported by concentration, it can lead to distractedness and not focus and not clarity, and so that's what I say. There's various degrees or qualities of these. You know,
a state of mind which would describe the opposite of like a wholesome state of mind would be like the open, spacious, with clarity. Yeah, just like things instead of cloudiness.
Yep.
Is it possible to have an open, spacious state of mind that notices lots of the distraction? So like in the same way, like with noticing delusion, there's a clarity that notices the delusion. Is there an open, spacious kind of mind that notices the distraction?
Could be, if you have mindfulness in there. Yeah. Depends on the degree, how much people, you can say, lose themselves into it, identify with it, or maintain the observing of it. So as long as there's always mindfulness there, awareness, observing. So now we're moving into the hindrances and other qualities and specific states of mind, but you're working on contracted and distracted right now, right?
Yeah. I got distracted all the time. Every day.
Yeah. You move on to the exalted next. Yeah. And concentrated. Yeah.
It's more of a general question, but sometimes I feel like there's a really gross layer of delusion because of the amount of intellectualization that we go through. Like we're always talking, like, you know, just in Buddhist communities we're often like, oh, this is dukkha, and don't do this and don't do that. And I feel like most of us haven't actually reached that point yet to actually come to the realization that it is suffering, and therefore we're just kind of like, I mean, it's just
it's like intellectualizing it to keep it at a safe distance. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're not actually feeling or experiencing things because we're just so caught up in our head. Yeah. What do you think about that?
What do I think about it?
Well, yeah. I mean, do you think that it's helpful to have this constant? I don't know.
No, I mean it's I would say it's a little bit of a a danger too, in a way that being too Buddhist,
Too Dhammic.
too Dhammic, too Buddhist or something or other. And I mean, the Buddha gave us these. He recognizes that people still need concepts, or can benefit from concepts. But the whole point of using the concepts is to lead you out of the concept to direct experience.
Yeah.
But then some people stay within their kind of conceptual Buddhist cocoon, and think we're safe because we're Buddhists, so I know all about it, but never really experience it. So it's a bit of a danger that way. I mean, they're ahead of the game in a way because they have the understanding of the path, but they haven't applied it yet. So I mean, it's they got one foot in the path, but dragging the other one. So that's why there's in the forest tradition, there's always emphasis on practice. I mean, and being with Ajahn Chah, he was in the forest monastery, and he was a forest monk. I mean, you could say, par excellence or something, which was quite unusual in Thailand because most of the monks are study monks or ceremony monks.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very committed to being a forest monk. That's where he had his breakthrough, his success, and so he really, sometimes he would, not so much in public, but in conversations with the monks, his disciples, he would really kind of criticize the intellectual approach, you see.
Yeah. It's almost like there's no space to come to our own realizations when we're constantly just intaking information from another source.
Yeah. Like one of the things he said when I was there, he said, close your books and read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, he's being anti-intellectual, But he wasn't. He didn't say, he didn't burn books and say condemn books. He said, just close your book, read your mind. And once you can read your mind, then you have the basis to read the book wisely. The people are reading the books to find the answer in the book out there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read your mind, the source of everything is in your mind. So you understand that principle. And then you open the book and it just gives you some pointers how to look at your own mind. It brings up themes for reflection then, rather than you being caught in trying to find the answer in the book. You're always bringing it back to your own mind. Oh yes, that insight arose in the mind. That reflection arose in this mind, not in the book. So you have the very good grounding in now how to practice. So you can go back to the books, but now wisely, rather than depend upon them only to give you more Dhamma stimulation and not insight, but more things to talk about.
It must have been amazing to be in his presence.
And he made some quite derogatory comments about people intellectualizing. He said one time was it something like the scholars are like the vultures flying up in the sky. He said,
Mm-hmm.
and when they come down, what they come down to eat. He said, the vultures eat carrion. You see. So they come down and eat the rotten corpses, They're flying up there thinking they're so high-minded, but then they come down and eat the scraps. So.
On that note, I was wondering about the dwelling internally and externally, which is in feelings. Is there when one abides internally, when one abides externally, can one abide? Is it like there's many different ways that could be, couldn't it?
It's not abiding internally. It's abiding, observing these feelings internally.
So it's not like, because when one like goes, oh, I am this, you're like, I can't take my hat, that's my hat, or I am, like the other day the bell rang and I was like, oh, my hearing, it's like this sense consciousness, so I was like, oh, my hearing, or one goes, oh, my thought, or I saw the thought, I know, or me knowing, or it could be like abiding. I could abide or have the conceit of being external to the body. I could have the conceit of being in the body. Or I could have the conceit of being in the body and outside the body, watching both. Is that also is this just vultures eating carrion?
As a matter of being the observing of these particular feelings and states of mind as they occur internally, as they occur externally. So there's not even in that kind of instruction, there's not even a reference to I of doing it. It just is developing, putting energy into the observing. The sati is ultimately, when it's developed, it's beyond yourself, you see. It's beyond I influence. It is you can say, like it's a non-personal condition of mind. But our I keeps coming into it. It doesn't want to be left out of the picture, so it keeps coming in. Oh, I'm being mindful. Yeah. That's not means mindfulness isn't really developed yet. When mindfulness gets developed, it just leaves the I out of the picture, and there is awareness. Oops, where am I in this? Sorry, you aren't necessary. And to really be aware, you have to leave the I behind. The I is a distortion of full awareness. So it's like a little way of kind of bypassing this insidious inclusion of I all the time. The I is extra. It's not necessary. Sometimes you need to, refer to it, but it isn't necessary all the time. But mindfulness is. Without mindfulness, life is dangerous. Without self, life gets on fine by itself. Without a self. So just try and put more energy into the observing rather than the observer. Easy to say.
Is it just sort of like caring for something? Like it's care for like the conditions?
Just like
caring for conditions?
Caring.
Like,
yeah. For conditions.
For conditions.
Yeah.
Is it care for other people? Because otherwise you'll have it'll be disturbance.
Yep.
Care for truth or something.
Yep.
Could be conceit. Let go conceit.
Yeah. But you just keep putting energy into the development of awareness and energy, these qualities, and then the sense of it. You try and suppress the self. That's also self. Try to ignore the self. It's also self-activity. But when you empower these qualities of mindfulness and concentration, then they have their own intrinsic power beyond the influence of self. We'll come to that with the factors of awakening. So the next theme.
But your books are not here.
Sold out.
There's no copies of Longpole's book yet.
There is in the library. Yeah.
That's right.
So the next theme is the hindrances. Yeah. So are you ready for the hindrances?
Oh, by the dozen.
Okay. It's not the third day blues, it's the third week blues, is it?
Every millisecond one takes over.
Okay, so you read the next chapter, the next section on the hindrances, the 5 hindrances, so you're at least familiar with them. The 5 hindrances. Just go that far. Don't go further.
We read it all the time.
yeah.
We
Well-
don't read the book.
yeah. Well, at least just recognizing these it's not yours. They're just hindrances, you know. They're just kind of universal hindrances. So, yeah. So for the next week, hindrances week. Just try to observe them. Don't indulge in them. Just observe them. At least try to observe what is the most prominent hindrance anyway. I mean, you know, but maybe you can also, you know, at least be intellectually familiar with the 5 hindrances, because they'll probably eventually come up anyway, you know, sometime or other. So, sometime being able to understand them in their context maybe allows you a little bit more spaciousness with them, openness to them. Okay, good enough for this week? States of mind? You might need to take 5 weeks with the 5 hindrances, huh?
That's fine, I'm going to stretch it out.